Okay. So talk a little bit about just one aspect of some of what this monk Ajahn Suddhito offered. In some ways, he's very kind of traditional Theravadan monk and teacher, and and sort of you really it's 42 years in robes, and a serious practice before that, and in a lot of ways, you just see the kind of like rigor and kind of orthodox traditional approach to practice, but there's also this very like rebellious, innovative, iconoclastic kind of character, and he uses very idiosyncratic language, like unusual language, to describe Dharma, and so he talked a lot about like fields, the body field, the relational field, the Dhamma field, Dhamma field, yeah, and he's using that language, I think, because to say body is sort of like a little more discrete than actual experience. And so he's using this word like fields, the body field, the mind field, the relational field, as a way of actually opening to this, a kind of accounting for the interpenetration of the experience, yeah? That we are porous, we are mixing, that exactly where the field of my body ends is not so clear, given that it's impacted by so much, yeah? By the temperature and pain and, and what's happening here. Like in this is a field too. Like I often say, it feels like, I'm the kind of like, you're the audience and I'm the entertainment, kind of, and that's really an illusion. Like what's actually happening is it's arising in between all of us. Yeah, and I know, like what my where my mind ends is certain like mysteriousness around it, because in a certain way, like a Dharma talk, it's a co-arising. Like I'm talking, but what I'm saying is profoundly impacted by the sincerity that you're bringing, yeah? The quality of attention and open-heartedness and curiosity and supporting each other and, like just holding attention or being still or quiet or whatever. Like these are all, like this is a very, there are many kind of parts of this dance, And so, in this language of fields, we start to get a kind of intuitive sense of what he called like the Dhamma field, yeah. Like the sense of actually, as we start to get quiet, we can begin to like have a sense of tapping into the field of the Dharma, this collection of teachings. And he said something like, the taste of the Dhamma field is always liberating. Yeah. Like you know that sense of we're living, we're experiencing body and mind and relationality, and then somehow we come back and connect with the heart, with the Dharma heart in this like sincere way. And just a moment of that can cut through a day or a week or a lifetime of struggle, And it's like a whole just landscape opens up in that moment. So, Ajahn was speaking about the kind of the relational field, yeah, and this was a silent retreat, and how many people have done residential silent retreats before? Yeah, okay. So silent retreat, so you're not talking to anybody else, and you're not intentionally making eye contact, and you're really just sitting and walking in silence all day. And so in some ways we're like pretending that the relational field is like not there, right? But it's totally there. There's a very kind of like potent sense of community, being together, practicing together in silence. But in some ways we're like pretending that we're just, on our own. And so there was a kind of explicit attempt to really actively acknowledge, like, no, we're doing something together. We're in a field together. And he brought in some relational practices that he used for years, 20 years or so, and the abbot of a Buddhist monastery in England, Chithurst, and he found that like the monastic community needed some interpersonal support, some kind of, you can imagine living together in a kind of celibate, renunciate life, day after day, year after year. There are possibilities for interpersonal tension, right? And so you're like, okay, sometimes, meditation it's like, it should help us, in the realm of interpersonal relationship. But it doesn't always, There are ways in which certain skills can be developed in practice, and then other skills are underdeveloped. And so actually in the monastery he started to actually do these kind of relational practices that he didn't invent, but he sort of borrowed from other paradigms. And he, so it's something I've shared about before. But just the sense of, just how deeply evocative it is to be with other people, Like, we sort of acclimatize to it, so it's like, it starts to not seem like a big deal to, like, talk to somebody for a minute, to say hello. Like, we got pretty good at that, right? We can do that. how's it going? Yeah. Like, but in a way to like insulate ourselves from the intensity of that, we have these like very pattern routinized personality-based ways of interacting, yeah? So like when we meet, and we're like, actually in a Dharma field, like, you know, it's a bit different. But if you just are talking to somebody random on a street, it's like personality rigidifies, and then it's like these two caricatures, like playing out weird social rituals, you know, and that's you know, protects in some ways against the like rawness and potency of being with other people. It's a big deal, you know? And so like the garb of personality and routine ways of communicating like really is a kind of armoring against the kind of visceral, quivering aliveness of like really meeting another being. Yeah? And Sujita said something like it's almost, he used the word, I think, eerie. It's eerie how much we accept these like very thin contact, you know, mind and mind, like, and just like so personality based, you know? And yet we're like deeply alienated and longing for a certain amount of like heart contact, to meet in the heart field, in the Dhamma field or something, yeah? Like that's a very different kind of contact. And it's deeply nourishing, but also intimidating or vulnerable, right? And so we want to, you know, this is part of the idea of Kalyana Mitta, of spiritual friendship, of the friendship of community, of Sangha. Like we want to actually like develop relationships, community in such a way that actually it's safe for heart to meet heart. Yeah? Like for us to just not need to like wear all of the programs and routines and patterns of communicating and self and you know, just the whole charade of that. It's like I for when I was a kid, I was like, yeah, well, not just when I was a kid. When I was a kid and an adult, like certain kinds of social situations where like there's no heart contact, you know, like certain kinds of gatherings or parties or whatever, or, you know, I don't know. I could do it. Like I could do it. I could pull it off and not make a total ass of myself, you know, in those kind of super small talk scenarios. But it just hurt so much, you know? It's just like, oh, God, you know, like, and it's not like connection needs to be about anything. Like I can have a very deep, nourishing heart connection about Steph Curry. like for real. Like I could talk to a fellow Warriors fan and we enter the Dhamma field together, you know. It's not about like, all right, we have to be actually talking about the meaning of life or something. It's like, no, can you actually feel the heart of another? Can you really make that kind of contact? And so we want to develop this both for like the profound like nourishment of it, and it can almost be like, oh yeah, that's like water in a desert, you know? But we also want to see like the nature of the programs and what gets evoked in the space, in the relational field. Like what happens to us for real, you know? And so we start to like look, you know, and Sangha is a place to play with that, a place to like explore what goes on for me. And what are the patterns of kind of accommodation and competitiveness and seduction and playful, like what happens? What happens in that field? What gets evoked in us? And this is like, you know, this takes us into some of the like really deep themes of practice, of who we take ourselves to be, of vulnerability and openness and all of the past conditioning, the way like you know, it's so much has formed our interpersonal repertoire, you know, and how we engage with others, how safe it feels to make heart contact, yeah, and you know, it's like, okay, like the gaze of another person is very, it kind of reverberates with so much from our own history. Like what did our parent or, you know, caretaker, like what did they see when they looked at us? And what was evoked in us? Or what does our society see, you know, when they look at you, right? And this experience is like highly varied, of course, yeah? I mean, you know, just, I you know, as like just a white person in this country, a male, you know, yeah, it's very different, yeah, it's very different. But I walk with, you know, a friend, you know, a black friend, woman, and we, you know, the looks like that I see just in being with a, you know, friend, like the look of kind of contempt and judgment. It's like I literally no one ever does that to, like when I'm walking, and it's just, yeah. And she just been living with that day in, day out, yeah? So it's like very multi-layered. It's family conditioning, it's our own cultural conditioning, like what do people do with their gaze, you know? I think, you know, it's like gender and the kind of, the sort of, the kind of, I associate it, you know, mostly with men, like the kind of voyeuristic, primitive, visual objectification, you know? of people they're attracted to. It's like a lot happens in that gazing. And so we got paired up in the middle of a silent retreat where we're sitting a lot. I was sitting a lot. Sitting late into the night and, like totally silent. And then we got paired up and it's like, all right, first I'll go find a partner. Like in the context of silence, that's a big deal. Yeah, it's like full on traumatic memories of like middle school dance, like, and me just like standing on the side of the gym, just petrified, That wasn't supposed to evoke deep sympathy or anything. I'm okay. But you get the vibe, right? Yeah. So, so it's like, all right, the learning starts immediately as the instructions are given, yeah? And it's 44 of us, like in this big room, find a partner. And for me, I was like, I was just in a state where the heart was just really open, like, but I felt maybe too open, like, it was like, yeah, in a completely non-sexual way, I was like super horny for metta. Is that okay to say? It was like just so ready to love, it was just like, just give me a fucking partner. I'm just ready to love you. I don't care any of you. Like, and I was like, all right, Brensilver. Let's keep it together, man. Like, so actually, like the learning started. Like, I really did feel like a little dysregulated. Like I was, and I just felt like, all right, I'm this big, dumb, golden retriever meta dog, like, and I'm just not gonna, I don't want to slobber on anybody. Like that was the feeling, so like, okay. I just stayed still, like when you said, like, okay, go find a partner, and also, there were people who were I was a yogi student there, but there were people that I've taught, a number of people that I've taught on retreats and stuff. And so I was like, all right, I'm not going to make any movement towards anyone. I'm just going to actually, because I don't want to actually impose my energy on them, even if it's very positive, but it's like, all right, so I actually just kind of looked down, and if somebody came and, to sort of like pair up, okay, great. And if not, that's fine too. So I looked down and somebody I know, somebody who sat retreat with me, but we were really kind of just friendly, very simple kind of relationship. And so the instruction is, okay, stand whatever, 10 feet away or something like that. And then you're going to sense into the kind of relational dynamic and field between the two of you. And you each can make gestures of come closer, slow down, or stop. Yeah? And no words, you're just exploring in the silence what actually happened. Like, okay, what is it like to just stand there in this like very, vulnerable, exposed kind of state, and to listen deeply to yourself and be attuned and sensitive to another being, and to track the relational field that's emerging between the two of you. Yeah? And all the kind of lessons on offer from that, like what can actually happen in there, yeah? And and so for me, my heart was very open, and so we're moving, getting closer to each other slowly, but I'm like, it was really just like, just metta in the mind, and a sense of, even just like his face, the visual impression of his face just like blurring out in this field of metta, yeah? And then I did something that I kind of knew I was going to do, yeah? Which is like some kind of egoic notion of in myself is like, we're supposed to get really close. I am a sensitive New Age guy. And if we're not basically kissing, we've failed, And as a meditation teacher, I have blockages, and so it was like, all right. And it was just so interesting. We're like moving, closer together. And the metta was like, it was so strong. And then I like just sensed this subtle kind of sense of accommodation of him coming closer. Like we reached a certain limit where it felt like very steady state. And it was like, mine was very open. We were close, but it was like, this is actually right. And then to kind of accommodate his move in and my sense that I should be able to be even closer, yeah, I moved without the signal of slow down or stop or something, and instantly, like that, the metta completely dissolved. Yeah. And there was this kind of like sense of like, oh, we actually disconnected by getting closer. It was like, no, the love was actually existent, dependent on the space, yeah? Dependent on the appropriate amount of space. We think of love as like enmeshed and merged, yeah, but they're like certain kinds of love are dependent on space. And so in that moment there was this learning of like, oh yeah, you pushed through something and I knew I was going to do exactly that, and I did it, yeah. I knew I was going, because I wouldn't want to say no, to this friend, right? And so maybe you can envision like what it's like to actually override your own intuitive sense of what the distance should be, yeah? Or like where intimacy is possible. Yeah. And then so there was that moment of collapse, and then another kind of very open state actually arose, but it arose sort of like despite that kind of subtle form of self-betrayal, So, So what gets evoked in the relational field? Now, I didn't have it this time, but generally, what happens when people get close and make eye contact in that kind of undefended way, is that the sense of ourself is deeply evoked. Yeah, like we are sort of imagining what they're seeing, and in a certain way manicuring or trying to curate our presentation. Yeah? And it's like the gaze of the other is so, it really actually, in a very kind of intense way, just shines this kind of like spotlight on the architecture of our ego and self-view. And so we actually get to see in ways how the actual sense of self is at least in part dependent on fear. And the fear of judgment, or the fear of shame, yeah, or the fear of some kind of exposure. And it's like, in order to like insulate ourselves against some of that, we like, the self kind of constellates, and then we try to like dose the amount of intimacy, yeah? Like we try to like manage it and engineer the nature of the contact in the relational field. But but that actual sense of self in some ways it feels like the cause of fear, but in some ways it's the effect of fear. Yeah? It's the effect of a certain kind of maybe shame proneness or something. And so that sense of fear as the self as an effect of fear, then it becomes a kind of like the compounded, because then the identification as this thing separate from them, becomes a source of a lot of suffering and deadness in relating. Yeah? And so part of what we're actually learning to do is actually to work with that sense of limitation and the exclusivity of self, the sense of that I end here. At some level, when you look in the eyes of somebody, the sense of self is a liability. It's like guaranteed to deaden something in the field. And so part of what we do in our practice is we sort of like look, deconstruct, we see, start to know the self as an experience arising in a field, yeah? Rather than the experience from which we view life. And in this spirit, like the metta it's not the same as this insight into anatta, into not self, but it's like the self creates boundaries, and metta breaks them down. Yeah? Self creates boundaries, and the metta starts to break them down. And so that love and openness and starting to, like, it's moving us actually in the direction of appreciating the porousness of our being, the field-like nature of our being. And so the sense of the other and the sense of self-consciousness, self-reference, all of that actually is in the same field. Yeah? And then there can be deep connection. We get to practice this in small ways. Yeah. Here in Sangha, in our lives, get to like experiment, look, listen. Yeah. A lot of compassion in the listening. What's evoked? What happens? How does this self constellate? What does accommodation mean? What do I want? What do I want? What does the heart want? What is connection? What is intimacy? It's nice to be with you. So, I think that's it. We're at time. Center is supported by your generosity. So, any donations that feel heart appropriate and most appreciated, and I will hang around for a while if people have questions, and hopefully I won't be like creepy in the conversations or weird meta creepy or something. Anyway, nice to be with you. Yeah, very well.